Let's see how we get this working. Hello, everyone. Welcome. This is our first live stream on Astro-Nomical Pi Studio. Echo Foxtrot, that would be me. Tonight is Lieutenant Pancake's second hatch of Versary, and I'm here to essentially bring him on camera if someone wants to say hello. He's eyeballing me in the corner, and I've got my official Starfleet uniform, so we are going to be doing this as officially as possible. That's what the backwards cap, making me look like a discount TJ from Recess, is about. I'm hoping we get a lot of people in here, and or one person, and or... No, they didn't know I was doing this. Again, he's staring at me in the corner. In fact, let's get Lieutenant Pancake on stream really quickly so that we can have a little bit of continuity. Now, it's up to you, the viewer, to tell me exactly how the quality of the stream is. I understand that the webcam will be purchasing a new one so that we'll be able to do this in a much higher fidelity, higher quality stream. Computer was meant for editing, not necessarily for streaming. This right here is Lieutenant Pancake fresh off his birthday mealworms. We'll be taking questions in the comments about anything you want to ask Lieutenant Pancake, anything that you've ever wondered, hey, I wonder what this gecko was thinking as he was forced to film this skit. And here we are. Lieutenant Pancake is a tangerine leopard gecko hypo-baldy mix of some sort. He's essentially a chromatophorically interesting gecko. We got him about, I would say, December of last year. He was from a company called Geeky Gecko Creations. Geeky Gecko Creations, and they're a friend of the channel. And unfortunately, my hair is doing the Emperor Penguin thing. Hello. Of course, my friend Rockhopper will probably correct me on the fact that it's not the Emperor Penguin that does that. It is the Rockhopper. Hence the name. I highly advise people get leopard geckos. I'm coming up with questions in my brain, by the way. This is how I'm going to do this before questions actually roll into the chat. If I just have a mental conversation with myself. So let me think of good questions to ask myself. Why are you so alone? No. A good question to ask myself would be, what's it like working with Lieutenant Pancake? Well, Lieutenant Pancake, like a lot of leopard geckos, is extremely chill. You can get very energetic leopard geckos that have no chill, or you could get, most of the time, a leopard gecko that is willing to bond with you. Most of the time, when chilling out, I'll just drop him down the collar of my shirt, and he'll hang out using my body heat to lounge, not die, lounge. So, you know, the interesting thing is that he will actually watch TV with you. Sometimes when you're watching television or a movie, your leopard gecko, at least mine, will pop their head up because they're attracted to movement more so than images. For the way I understand leopard gecko vision is that everything is kind of a low fidelity quality to them, which you, as the viewer watching a low fidelity stream, are probably easily relating to. So if I were further back and standing still like this, you might not be able to see me aside from the mouth that's clearly moving and making motion. Bad example. What they do see is movement primarily. So when you move, they're more likely to see you and tune in. Another cool thing he's doing right now, he's actually wrapping his tail closer around my thumb. The tail is not prehensile by any means, but they do have the ability to use it like a fifth limb. I've seen him balance on it like Tigger from Winnie the Pooh. I've seen him wrap around my finger like a question mark, and they can really use their tail to good effect. You're never supposed to grab them by it, though, because that can cause them to drop it. But the cool thing is they can actually drop it from any segment. A lot of people think that leopard geckos drop their tails and that's it. It's just one tail. Well, it is one tail, but it's every ring around their tail, every one of these little bands is a section that could drop off. So they could drop off from here, from here, from here, from here, you know, anything along those rings. And that's pretty interesting. Let's think. What is it like making movies with Lieutenant Pancake? Well, Lieutenant Pancake is not too fussy. You're usually able to get him out of the tank very easily. But to get him to essentially do what you want, you need to act quickly. That's kind of, I suppose every gecko is different, but with me, if you have a gecko that sort of gets a little bit fussier the longer they're out of the tank, which he does, you want to be able to film something quick. So if you're trying to make a leopard gecko parody, if you're trying to show them on stream, if you're trying to make an educational video, my best advice is get them early. If a kid is going to be handling them, same thing. At least with Lieutenant Pancake. I'm not an expert by any means, but I have cared for leopard geckos, on and off my whole life, and it's been a pleasure. Lieutenant Pancake is the first tangerine leopard gecko that I've ever owned. The others were from pet stores, but I don't recommend buying your leopard gecko from big name pet stores. I recommend going on to maybe Morph Market, maybe looking at relatively close by breeders. And I just look at local reptile breeders in your area and make sure they have things like a live arrival policy, that they're willing to take good care of the animal. And God forbid, if the animal has a problem, the most common, I think, is usually illness or a failure to thrive, which is usually where the animal is too stressed and passes away, or it comes with an illness, that they have a refund policy. I remember purchasing an animal in the past, a reptile, and the company had a 7-day policy on like the failure to thrive thing. And at 7 days, you're just starting to learn the animal's rhythms and what's normal and what's not. How many have I had thus far? All right, we've got a comment from Ink Show Dude, friend of the channel. I've had one other leopard gecko named Geronimo. In my mind, there are two types of leopard geckos, droppers and jumpers. Jumpers are usually the ones that you try to pick them up and they will fling. And leopard geckos do not care about distance, height, latitude, longitude. They will jump and they will fall as far as it takes to get to the ground, even if it kills them, if they're jumpers. If they're droppers, they'll do kind of the exact same thing, but it's much easier to handle. If the leopard gecko just slowly crawls off your hand, you can usually stop them before the plummeting. But my first leopard gecko was a jumper, and his name was Geronimo. He was your standard yellow, white, and black spotted leopard gecko, and I have a drawing of him right here I can get. I believe I drew this. Yes. All right. I believe I drew this when I was in either 4th grade or... Yeah, it was 4th grade. So I would have been about 9 or 10. And this is how I spelled Geronimo, by the way, for all you... with a J. I used to call him Journey Mo. And J-Ronimo right here. And it's there's a little bit of casual leopard gecko racism that Lieutenant Pancake's not going to like, because leopard geckos do not actually have striped tails. They have spotted tails. So sorry about that, Lieutenant Pancake. I was 9. You got to give me a little bit. And I drew cacti because they pass by cacti every once in a while. Not commonly, though. A lot of people, again, think that leopard geckos dwell only in the desert, and that's why they put them with sand. It's not a good idea. If you're going to put sand, mix it with make it play sand. Mix it with something like eco earth and some kind of substrate, and something that's not too dusty. They do not like dust. They do not like sand, which is why in their native regions, they try to crawl into little rock formations, little crags, into abandoned houses. They will stay by like a coastline with some grass. Unfortunately for Lieutenant Pancake, he is the experiment of illicit crossbreeding. I'm kidding. No, he's a morph, and he's designed for the pet trade. He was bred for more color and bombasticity, which is why he's such a great movie star, but not necessarily why he would survive if I dropped him in a green field. I'm sorry. I meant you'd make it, but it would be like a battle royale. It would be like you'd have a good 5 minutes and then No, if you've ever played Warzone, it's the same thing. Imagine a sniper, be a hawk. So for those who just joined the stream, we're fielding questions for Lieutenant Pancake. Anything you want to know about him, or you can ask for his opinion specifically. You can ask for tips on making your own gecko videos, or you can ask anything you want. And I will continue rambling on for the next couple minutes. It is his second hatchiversary, so he is now 2. He was hatched 2 years ago on August 16th. I don't know what time, but I do know that his gender was predetermined. Now, how does that happen? Well, with reptiles, it's kind of like Jurassic Park. When I know a lot of different reptile species have this, where the different temperatures determine the sex of the eventual animal. So I could be wrong on this, but I believe females are colder eggs. And by cold, I mean relatively speaking. It's a slightly lower temperature. The eggs have to be incubated at a high temperature, but like a slightly lower temperature for the females and a slightly higher temperature for the males. And so they'll label them and they'll put them in different incubators, and they'll know ahead of time, all right, I'm going to have this many males. Of course, I'm sure there's a little bit of overlap. I'm sure every once in a while you'll get that small bit of temperature variance where a male should have been a female and a female should have been a male. But it's not, you really don't necessarily know until they hit maturity. Now, how do you know? You will actually see on the males a V just above the cloaca, which you'd think, my guys, you'd think the V would be for the females, but no, it's for the males. And they also have a little tiny bump just under the tail. And that bump is known as the hemipenal bulge, which I can't say with a straight face. And now that he's reached maturity, I can confidently say that it is no longer simply a semi-penal bulge. Welcome to the stream. So essentially, leopard geckos are about the most chill reptile I think you can get. Their close ancestors are around the fat-tailed gecko, which is exactly what you might think. They're not as pretty, and they have big, plump, fat tails as opposed to these long tails. And a leopard gecko can go quite a while with the amount of lipids that are stored in their tail. I wouldn't want to test that theory, but I think they can go about 3 months without food as long as they have a source of water. We use Eco Earth in his terrarium, which is this shredded coconut fiber substrate. And the interesting thing about leopard geckos, excuse me, there's the pizza. The interesting thing about leopard geckos, well, there's a lot of interesting things, but that the upfront cost, if you want to do it right, is a bit much. If you want to give, I have about 100-gallon plus tank. Now, I'd say that for a single leopard gecko, a 40-gallon terrarium is really where you'd want to start. I'd say that's the bare minimum I would recommend. It doesn't matter too much when they're just starting out, when they're babies, when they're hatchlings. Up till about 3 months, they really don't care. They can be in a small enclosure, but they shouldn't be kept there for long. And they shouldn't be kept with each other. I mean, you see a lot of breeders keep leopard geckos as babies, as juveniles with each other. And I think that is actually fine. But once they hit a certain threshold, you want to separate them. Lieutenant Pancake is actually from a very prestigious line of God knows what. But his father is actually still with the company we got him from and still producing offspring. And the plan is, hopefully, when his father named Magma retires, I don't know why I'm bouncing him. You're 2 years old. You're too old for that. No, you're not too old for that. The plan is, once his father reaches retirement age, we're going to do a sort of Frasier and Martin thing where his dad comes to live with him, and I'm going to set up a separate tank next to him, and they can see each other through the glass. So they'll never be able to hurt each other because we've all been there, right? We've all been there in those nights. Saturday night, you're chilling. Your dad makes a offhanded dad joke to you, and you think, I bet I could beat this guy at arm wrestling now. It's been enough years. I've been working. You can't. I mean, you might, but like either you beat him and the relationship is damaged, or he kicks your butt, and that's just more therapy for you. Lieutenant Pancake is just looking at me. They enjoy low frequencies. I've seen people try to whistle to leopard geckos, but from what I understand, the way their eardrums work, they enjoy bum, 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 lower frequencies. And they also have a tendency to, as I explained earlier, track motions. So if you give them a big screen to watch and you give them a decent distance from it so that the flashing lights aren't bothering them, it's not shining in their eye too much, sometimes what he'll do is he'll turn one eye to the screen and one eye away from it. And whichever side is looking towards the light source will have an extremely wide pupil. But if you look on the other side of their head, the pupil is just a slit. And that's really interesting. I've also heard tell that geckos, the way they see vision is they can see essentially more color than we can at night because of the rods and cones dynamic. So when it gets into low light, naturally we think, oh, they must not be able to see their food. I've heard people say, oh, my gecko's not eating. Sometimes I recommend actually turning down the light significantly to the point where, you know, if you were to stay there for a couple minutes, you'd be able to see inside the tank. But other than that, you'd have to adjust to your eyes. He sometimes prefers to eat in almost abject darkness. And as long as, you know, you have supervised them before and you know their patterns and you know that the worms cannot get out of the feeding tray, I'd say that's a safe-ish way to feed them because, you know, they're not going to really get hurt unless they swallow some of the substrate, which is why it's also good to feed them on top of a slate. So you got your little food dish, but you've also got a slate below it so that if the worm falls off really quickly, they can just grab it. But if you have a good food bowl, the worm should never escape. With him, his food bowl is a little bit low, but I've tested it. The worms don't really get out, and I usually feel very confident with him as for that. Let's see. Any other questions? Ooh, I know a good one to ask myself. What was the first parody I ever made with Lieutenant Pancake? Good question, me. That was Starship Geckos. I made a parody for Geeky Gecko Creations to try to promote their channel. And I later then put that video on my own channel. And it was basically just a clip of the audio of the landing on Klendathu. And you know, if you are a Starship Troopers fan, I'm sure that there's a cross part of the fandom with leopard geckos or with at least reptiles, because bug hunting is what we do. I don't care if you're a Helldivers fan. I don't care if you're a Starship Troopers fan, Halo, whatever, aliens. Hunting bugs is what leopard geckos do best. And I guarantee you, if a giant leopard gecko was let loose in a field of xenomorphs, it would take them. Guaranteed. All right? Now, I don't know if it would be like a murder-suicide thing because of the acid blood, but it could do it. Anyway, oh yeah. What do leopard geckos feel like? To those of you who've never held one, the back of them feels like almost like a basketball. If you've ever felt a basketball with particularly large bumps on the leather, that is it's essentially what a leopard you're going to be feeling. It's not scaly / slimy feeling like a snake. You know, they say snakes aren't slimy, but they have that weird the scales are so close together. They have this almost plasticky texture. Leopard geckos feel very much like leather. But their underbellies feel much more like softer leather, the kind that you'd get on maybe like a small woman's pocketbook. How do I know that? I've been forced to carry my mother's pocketbook. Gosh darn. I don't know. To any guys in the audience, if you've ever been in a store and your mom says, hold this for me, while she runs down the aisle to grab something and you're stuck holding a purse, let me know, because it's an interesting position to be in, let me tell you. Let's see, what else? Ooh, Lieutenant Pancake's here. How much do... I heard the invisible voice in my head ask, how much do mealworms and waxworms cost? Mealworms these days, if you look on popular retailers, like a regular, you know, public retailer, I'm thinking maybe PetSmart. Currently, I believe mealworms are going for about $3.49 or $4.49, somewhere between $3 and $4. Now, waxworms are a bit more expensive at $6, but it's okay because they're meant to be sort of a treat for the animal. They're meant to be, hey, either they're on a hunger strike or they need to bulk up because you got them secondhand and perhaps someone was mistreating them. That's a good way to bulk them up, and they will. We use calcium, but we don't give it with every meal. You want to give calcium about every 3 meals, I would say. At least once they hit adulthood. When they're younger, you want to give it, I believe, a bit more, but I'd have to double check that. And what I like to do when I hold him is I actually like to support his tail. And with a leopard gecko that trusts you enough, they actually don't mind you supporting their tail like this. You can see everybody will say, don't grab a leopard gecko's tail. And they're right. You should never grab a leopard gecko's tail. But if the gecko trusts you and it's just looking for some casual support, you can just support the tail. No problem. I feel like there needs to be a movement, a little hashtag called support the tail. And I don't know. We got to get on that. Let's see what else. Their feet are not pads like you'd expect from a crested gecko. They can't just climb up a straight wall the way a crested or some other geckos can, which is good for the non-escapes. However, they do have little nails on the end of their fingers. And what that means is that anything with like a bit of texture, a good enough amount of texture, something like wood, they can pretty much climb up it for a little bit. If they're strong enough, it could be pretty much near vertical, and they'll still try to climb it, and they might succeed, which is why you never want to leave anything that leads directly to the top of the tank. If you're okay, we're back. I think we're back. Sweet. Sorry about that. We seem to have been briefly disconnected. The computer seems to have briefly exploded. And you know what? Brief explosions of computers can be fun. You know, long as they're not monitoring something like a nuclear power plant or your taxes, I say go for it. Let's see. What else? I guess we're waiting for some people to get back in here. Lieutenant Pancake is having a very good birthday. Sending out some messages. There we go. Sweet. Sorry about that. I got one person back. The computer seems to have spontaneously combusted, or it was just afraid of being eaten by Lieutenant Pancake. Another thing I'll say, for people that are afraid of worms, I'd say, I don't know if this is going to help you, but they're actually not, mealworms are actually not worms. They are the larvae form of the darkling beetle. At least most of them are. The waxworm, I don't know what it's the larvae form of, but I do know that if you've played Grounded, larvae give you a lot of crap. So don't feel bad. I don't. Well, no, I did. Whatever. Kill the bugs. Trooper. Let's see what Lieutenant Pancake has to say. Anything, buddy? Look at those eyes. I've seen leopard geckos have basically all black eyes. One of the things that drew me to him was the fact that he's got gray eyes, almost this Mount Doom Eye of Sauron thing. And he's got a little soul patch here. He's got a little goatee, just like me. Got that little white spot on his chin. There's different kinds of leopard geckos that you can get. He was about $150 with $50 shipping, which was not too bad. And then, I'd say for what I got for the health of the animal, he has a pretty damn good deal. Oop, try not to swear. let's see what else. If you're considering a leopard gecko or a crested gecko, I would say you have to think to yourself, how much am I going to be doing with the gecko? If I had a crested gecko, for example, I would have to adapt my filming style significantly. The reason is because I'm not sure exactly too much. I've heard that I've heard that crested geckos have a relatively calmish temperament, but if you do manage to scare them and they do drop their tails, unlike leopard geckos, they don't grow back. Leopard geckos' tails, they will grow back, just not in the same way, and they won't look as nice, but they will grow back. With a crested gecko, you'll see some cresteds with just no tail, and that's either because they were caught from the wild, which is a very, very bad thing for sustainability, ethical reasons, all that. You want something bred in the country that you're currently in. Shipping has gotten a lot better too. So it's easy to ship an animal from, at least in America, across the country. There's also, let's see what else. There's also concerns about between leopard geckos and crested geckos. Leopard geckos like a relatively dry-ish environment, at least according to popular studies. There's debate whether that's outdated information, but right now all the data says that relatively pretty darn low humidity and temperatures in their basking spot reaching about 100 degrees with their regular hide somewhere in the mid to low 80s. And they can survive, and they should also have a cool hide that can go down into the 70s where they can just chill. He actually spends a majority of his time, or at least half his time, in a colder area, which is surprising because he knows where the heat is, he's memorized everything, and he knows where he can go. If you're hearing a slight buzzing in the background, that is an electric fan. It is shielded, and it is away from the gecko, because if you've ever handled small animals, you know that an electric spinning fan is a bad thing. Let's see, what else? It's been a while since I've asked the audience. Does the audience have any questions? All one. I didn't give any advance warning, so, obviously, who am I to expect? Also, if you have a gecko, don't do the thing that most people do with the pencil, where you just bobble them like, oh, gee, wonder what. I do that far too much without thinking, and it's easy to do because you hold them like a stylus. By the way, to anybody that's old enough to remember, do you remember the DSi XL and that really fat stylus that came with it? Well, look, all right, I'm going to put an image when at some point. It's the same thing. This is, and you know what else? The tail actually works as a stylus too. Not the tip, but once you get up to about here, it can start connecting and scrolling if you just scroll your gecko across the screen. I tested it, so you don't have to. What else? They're absolutely fantastic at getting a grip. As long as they've got a good center of gravity, they can. I mean, look at this. He's doing almost a 7-10 split. He's hanging on to one finger with both of his front claws, and he is he's stoked. He's happy to be here. It's a party. What else? It's also pretty darn fun to be able to take little things. Like, for example, this is a race car from the Mario Kart Live thing they did for the Nintendo Switch a couple years ago. And it's pretty neat to put him on it and see how he's basically the right size for Mario Kart. And you will have more fun with this than even Mario Kart sometimes. I'll bet. If you're a reptile fan, this is where it's at. If Mario Kart 8 has you down, no wait, if 9 Mario Kart World, yeah, if Mario Kart World's got you down, get a gecko in a cart. There's quite a lot you can do with leopard geckos at all. Hello, second person to the stream. Welcome, Lieutenant Pancake's Hatchiversary. We're taking questions from anybody that wants to ask them of the gecko. And I guess you could ask a question of me, but I'm much less interesting. The gecko is really what we're here for. Gecko named Lieutenant Pancake. Say hello to your viewers, dude. He's calculating life itself. One of these days, the secret to life is probably going to come out of a reptile. It probably will come out of dogs first, but if you want a harsher, edgier take on what life is all about, read the gecko's memoir. If they ever learn, if there's ever a Planet of the Apes kind of thing with leopard geckos, it's going to be amazing. It's going to be amazing. And I guarantee you the world will be a better place, a harsher place with a lot less worms, but it will be an awesomer place. It'll be at least 20% cooler for those of you that get that reference. Let's see what else. You can also decorate. People think that leopard gecko enclosures are relatively boring, and they can be, but you can turn them into a bioactive terrarium or vivarium, with a little bit of living stuff like isopods. That's not personally for me. I don't want to deal with that much upkeep. I would rather give him perhaps some live plants that I water from time to time, or I would rather give him the opportunity to have maybe some fake plants or some wood that I've taken inside and sterilized. I hear you can do that. I'm planning to do that soon and make a video of it. I hear you can do that with an oven if you bake it to a certain temperature. And provided the house doesn't burn down, that'll be a fantastic video. And ironically, the way YouTube works, if the house does burn down, that'll be an even better video. Think about that. Think about that for a second, and our society should make a little more sense. And look at that. The leopard gecko tail to me is beautiful, and his reminds me specifically of carrot cake. If you see like the area where they're trying to promote the carrot, then it goes into the cheesecake frosting, and then the little bits of crap that are, I don't know what to call them, little bits of crap, little bits of raisin. What are they? I don't know if they're shredded. You know what I'm talking about? Does anybody know the little things that are in carrot cake? The little no? Yeah, me neither. But one of these days we're going to get to the bottom of it. What else? What I'm trying to experiment with recently is maybe geckos and video games, and how a gecko might respond to a moving image on screen that they control. I'm going to see if I can test that. And the way I'll test it is by seeing which way the leopard gecko moves and having an image on screen. And then I will move that character. It'll probably be a 2D side scroller to start. I'll move that character in accordance with where they're moving or where they're looking. And I'm only testing it with Lieutenant Pancake since he's my only leopard gecko. So it'll be a very small, unscientific study, but it'll be interesting and a thought piece. See what I mean about droppers? And now you can usually tell this is the point where a leopard gecko gets restless. After about half an hour, if they start climbing a lot like this, it usually means they want to start going somewhere. And if I had some sort of a tracking cam, I could let him do that. You can also see a minor sign that, sorry, buddy. You can also see a minor sign that he's a little bit worked up with his throat when it starts to do the dewlap thing. So we'll probably put him away in a couple minutes here, but he should be fine for right now. His heartbeat is relatively slow. So does anybody have any final questions for Lieutenant Pancake? Perhaps you're trying to make your own leopard gecko channel and you're looking for advice, or you just came to shoot the scat, as it were. Can't say anything more than that on YouTube. And I have noticed, by the way, that leopard geckos, at least this one, does seem to like blankets. Some sort of, if you give them a sort of cave with an opening, you scrunch up the blanket a little bit, you just have to absolutely make sure that the blanket does not touch their feet. So come to think of it, it's probably not the best idea unless you have some sort of miracle blanket, because the fear is that their claw will get stuck in the thread. I'm not too worried about it with things like perhaps one of these cloths, like this little piece blanket right here, because the threads are so are so interwoven. It's almost like, you know, canvas or a fabric. Or it's not really like little strands. But if you have anything that's like yarn, I mean, unless you're 100% confident, and even then it's a risk, I say probably don't do it, actually, now that I'm thinking more about it, the blanket thing. But for him, knowing him as I do and knowing my blankets as I do, I'm willing to take the risk because I feel like the risk is so low, so monumentally low, and I'm right there if he gets snagged on anything, that I feel like some risks are worth taking for the sake of enrichment. Now, don't quote me on that, and then you know, send me a ticket for free bungee jumping, because that will be, oh look, it's enrichment. No. He went splat in a very enriched way, But something like this, see this Snoopy sneaker right here. You wouldn't want to put a blanket like that. You wouldn't want to put that anywhere near them, because that would just snag on their little claws. And I don't know if I can even show them to you on camera because they're so small. You can see the fingers, but you'll probably never see the actual claw. Right now, it's really up to him how much he shows. And with this low resolution camera, you'll be lucky if it looks as good as the Blair Witch Project at night. So there's that. But Lieutenant Pancake, thank you for being such a fantastic sport. We are Astro-Nomical Pie Studio, named after the patron saint of the channel, Astro Pie, Flutter Pie, who is, I'm sure, will make an appearance here in one moment. In fact, she would be a fantastic way to end the stream. So let me get her and put Lieutenant Pancake back in his enclosure. And I'll get you Flutter Pie just to say good night to the stream. Come here, girl. All right. Here is Flutter Pie the Beagle, who's probably going to be the next participant in one of our streams, where you'll be able to ask Flutter Pie anything you want to know about her various endeavors on the channel. Is there anything you'd like to say to the audience, Flutter Pie, besides letting out a giant tube of gas from your vapor hole? Camera shy, huh? Well, thank you very much, ladies and gents, ponies and gentle colts. Ooh, she just let out a gigantic burp. There you go. Have an absolutely fantastic night and a fantastic weekend, and thank you for tuning in. I've been Echo Foxtrot, and this is my channel. That's right. Glad I remembered to say that. Good night, everybody.